Hey everybody! Day 2 for piece 2 of our 7 pieces of true healing. And I have with me today my little selenite sphere, because this actually is perfectly supportive for the theme of today. This is a very lunar and feminine energy, great stone for healing, and healing specifically with those qualities when those qualities are really needed. And honestly, in this day and age, who, regardless of gender or sex or how you identify, regardless of any of that, who doesn't need more of that feminine lunar energy in their lives for healing what ails them, right? So, hi Judy, welcome. So this is part 2, day 2 of the 7 pieces of true healing. And true healing, just to really drive this point home, I'm going to give it a brief introduction every time I come on. True healing is a dynamic, integrative, and holistic approach to multi-level healing. It is about deepening into our purpose. It's about understanding the gifts within our challenges and our traumas, and creating the physical existence that we truly desire and that we envision for ourselves. It's not about pacifying symptoms. It's not about fixating on surface level challenges that we experience in our body, in our health, and in our lives, in our work and in our relationships, anything in our tangible physical existence that's causing us challenges. Those are just symptoms. So true healing is not about pacifying those symptoms, and it's not about fixating on these surface level issues. It's about a multi-level approach to understanding the subtle root cause of these challenges, because all challenges stem from an imbalance or undigested trauma in our subtle levels. So those intangible, unseen levels of our existence, those emotional, mental, and spiritual levels of us, create the physical dis-ease that we experience. And so true healing is about addressing those subtle ailments and shifting them so that the gross can catch up and recreate in a manner that we intend. And by learning to be with the pain. So it's very juxtaposed to how we've been taught to handle things, which is to run from pain, to do anything we can to pacify it and get it to stop. True healing can only come when we are really with the pain and with the challenge, and decipher the symptoms that we're experiencing to find the pearl and to experience ourselves as we truly are, which is blissful and radiant and whole and expressed and embodying our highest essence. And that can sound a little out of reach, totally, and the best things often do. So it's possible, and it's well within our abilities and within our birthright. And this takes a great deal of true power, which we also discussed previously in a previous video that I invite you to look at. Right before this series started, we delved into what is true power and how does that play into manifesting true healing. And true power it's subtle in nature. It is about identifying these subtle layers and being with them, and being the warrioress, being incredibly courageous. That's where the true power is. It's not brute force. It's not brute strength and sheer will alone. Those things are not sustainable. They're often short-lived, and they don't produce sustainable, lasting results. So yesterday's first piece was deep and whole embodiment, and how returning to the physical body and using it as the teacher, the translator, the messenger, and the vehicle that it is the first step to truly identify and understand, like, what's really going on? What are my challenges? Where are they? And how can I deepen into them instead of just like, oh, this is uncomfortable, I'm gonna run away, putting that Band-Aid on. So embodiment. And if you weren't live, I highly recommend watching the replay. It was a fantastic, engaging session, and there was lots of beautiful sharing, beautiful wisdom, and it was a fantastic group of women that showed up, and I am so grateful for all of you. So today, the second piece, and again, these are in no particular order. because the healing or the holing process, as I like to say, because healing kind of have a negative connotation, right? Like we need fixing and there's something wrong with us. So it's holing and remembering the pieces, as in putting them back together. It's not linear, right? It's a very spirally process. Nothing happens in any particular order. However, embodiment, that first piece I shared yesterday, is always the beginning, because it allows us to assess our current reality and to perceive exactly what is without those clouded perceptions and those illusions that we have of ourselves. So everything that I'm sharing after embodiment is really in no particular order. Today, piece 2, I wish I had I need a drum roll button or sound. Embracing your creativity and sexuality. And I truly love this topic. I love all of these pieces, and they were all harnessed from my own journey and in working with clients and blending different modalities and different philosophies and different things. I've kind of distilled them down. So I love all of them, and I really love this topic. It's so loaded. It is so juicy. It could be a whole series on its own. So I'm pulling out key points. This is by no means an exhaustive overview. So creativity and sexuality, they are one and the same. They are two sides of the exact same coin. To be in alignment with your raw, pure, unfiltered primal life force is to assure your entire being that it is safe, that it's safe to explore, it's safe to ride the waves of expansion and contraction throughout life, of creation and destruction. We've talked about that before, how we all have that power to create and destroy many times in our life, and that we are always in some type of process simultaneously of creation and destruction. So engaging in this creativity and this sexuality, this primal piece of us, brings that level of assurance to the system so that everything else can flow smoothly. It's a very vital piece of true, deep, sustainable healing and getting to that root subtle cause. So our ability to receive and to engage in the rhythms of nature are directly related to how safe we feel in our bodies and in our lives, in our relationships, and our relationship with our creative power. So they play off of each other. We need to feel really safe to be able to slip into that creative and sexual place, and slipping into that space reiterates that level of safety. So they play off of each other. They're very, very important pieces to engage in simultaneously. And so for far too long, I mean, perhaps since the beginning of time, so much shame and guilt and trauma has accumulated in our collective body. So just human beings, the collective body of the human, resulting in unmet needs and unspoken boundaries and pacifying ourselves with unhealthful ways to fill that void. And so that's where many of these things come from, where that pacification of the symptom. So the challenge, I use challenge and symptom interchangeably, because people tend to use symptom for physical body challenges, and I would just like to reiterate that anything experienced in the physical realm of our existence is a challenge, is a symptom, because it is all created by us and created by the subtle building blocks of our emotional, mental, and spiritual bodies. So all of these undigested beliefs, these undigested emotions, all create everything. They're literally dictating everything that you do at any given time. So it's creating everything in your physical experience. So if you're having, shitty relationships, that's a symptom. But, because in our usage of the word symptom, it's not a physical body challenge. People don't really equate the two. So symptom, challenge, I'm using them interchangeably. They're the exact same thing. It's all a manifestation of the subtle realms. So pacifying those symptoms, we usually turn towards not very health supportive things to do that, right? We turn to food or booze or smoking or drugs, or just like what else can we consume, right? Consuming too much media, or surrounding ourselves with people who we don't really like. They're not nourishing to us. So these unsupportive ways of filling that void and pacifying that symptom. Shame. So I talked about how that has collected in the collective body. Shame is the biggest blockage to true healing, and it's the biggest blockage in accessing our creativity and our sexual life force. Straight up. Shame and its many shades, guilt, embarrassment, all of it. Shame is just a little SOB. So I invite you, I love asking questions throughout this, and they're more for you to sit with, hopefully journal on right now or at a later time. If you feel called to answer in the comments below, if you're watching live, if you're catching the replay, please do, because we learn from each other, and there is power in expressing something that you might not normally feel comfortable expressing. And that's part of that shame piece. So I invite us all to just like get over it and empower ourselves and each other. So how do you feel about your creative life? How does it feel when you are most creative and in that space of creative flow? And how easily can you access it? And how does it feel? Like the embodied experience of true creative flow, how does that present itself to you? Creativity and sexuality are linked to our second chakra, that sacral chakra, and this governs our literal and metaphorical waters, our lunar side, there's my selenite, our emotional body, and our ability to receive and be the fluid, flowy creatures that we are meant to be. It's the fear and the shame and the collective trauma that results in this rigidity and the lack of flow and fluidity. How do you feel about your sexuality? Forget the act of sex, all right? So forget what society has taught us. Forget what porn has shown us, what our preconceived notions are about sex, and all of these just perverse ways just that are not serving us. Get back to basics. So sexual energy is an expression. It is a creative, sensual, as in engaging with the senses, being the sensorial, embodied creature that you are with your five senses. It's a creative, sensual expression of life force and higher consciousness. And yes, higher consciousness can be a new agey woo-woo term. And in this case, I am meaning something that puts us in our bodies and in that flow state. So we're in deeper presence. We're out of the mental body blocks, out of the mind and those clouded perceptions, and it puts us into what is. So in being embodied, you understand, you'll see as we go along this series why being embodied really is that first piece. Because to really be with what is, to access what is, it's imperative to get in here. This vessel, he or she, is super wise. And this is our, like I said yesterday, our translator, right? For being here on earth and for being these kind of energetic creatures, like, the hell am I doing here? How do I do this thing? This is your way. How many more arm tricks can I do? I feel like Kermit the Frog puppet. So, to receive pleasure, and again, many of us we equate pleasure with like sex and immediately like the act of sex. So just let's get back to basics. We're being very curious and innocent right now. Very curious. So pleasure, to receive pleasure, is our birthright. The things that keep humans alive are pleasurable, right? Eating, sleeping. These things feel really good, and they feel really good for a reason, because they're required, right? Like, we need them to keep this body alive. So to receive pleasure is our birthright. And the ultimate act of curiosity and innocence and surrender and presence. So where are you denying yourself pleasure? It's going to be linked to shame or guilt or something of that nature, a past wound. Or, and you know, if you guys have followed me for any time, I love getting on about ancestral trauma and ancestral wounding, because you're you, yes, and so much of you isn't you from this lifetime in this body right now. And, if that sounds a little too, out there, we can talk. I can put my science hat on. I got both hats. I can wear the fairy esoteric hat or the science hat. So from a scientific perspective, you are literally the product of everyone else before you. So everything that happened to them altered their cellular makeup, altered their physiology, altered their DNA, which then was passed on to somebody else, and then somebody else, and then somebody else, and oh, hi, here you are. So that's the nature side. On the nurture side, whatever happened to your great-great-grandmother, all right? Say it was so traumatizing for her, it altered all of her characteristics. So then those traits, the way that she raised your father was passed down and blah, and so on and so forth. So there's that nature and nurture perspective. And then from a woo perspective, the energetic imprints as well that are stored in you, stored in your waters, in your body. It's there. So where are you denying yourself pleasure? There is, aside from the sex piece and we equating pleasure with just sex and trauma and the guilt around that in our society, we deny ourselves pleasure, I feel, almost on an epidemic scale. We see it in diet culture. We see it in, the workout culture and how everything just gets more and more intense and go, 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 and the no pain, no gain, and anything that is slowing down, even just for a breath, which I'll do right now. So pleasurable, right? Just the most basic pleasurable thing of life is that delicious breath. So slowing down for a breath, something like that, is not celebrated. It's almost looked down upon. So we deny ourselves pleasure and have such an aversion to it because it's wrong or it's shameful. Hi, Lulu. Thank you for being here. Because it's wrong or it's shameful. So just think about and feel into and watch yourself over the next couple of days. Where are you denying yourself pleasure? And I've had I love using myself as an example. I tend to be an open book, and I'm like, what the hell are my experiences and challenges for, if not to learn from and to grow from, and then to offer as medicine in my work. So something I've been really unraveling lately, and I talked about it at length yesterday, is the way that I deny myself the pleasure of integrating and digesting my experiences, and how I will push myself so much. And I started to fall into that habit, that old way that I picked up in childhood, because all of these ways served us at some point. But I started to fall into that right before I launched this little 7-day training that I'm doing with all of you. And I was having those old stories come up about, this is going to suck, no one cares, no one's going to show up, the stuff you're sharing is not good enough, whatever. And I was like, no, this is going to be great. And I started to fall into that pushing mentality as opposed to the pleasurable, because if the destination is the same, I'm going to do this, I'm going to share, that's going to happen, that's the destination. If the destination is the same, why am I picking this shitty hard road when there's one that could be a little more pleasurable? And, as I was talking about yesterday, that didn't cause my old physical body manifestations of this subtle imprint to pop up. All right, and I'm pointing to these lovely breakouts on my chin, which I'm like, oh, this is so beautiful. I've just committed to going on camera live for 7 days in a row, and I have had great skin for good long while now, and then bam. So we're never done. We're always playing with different sides of these things that will show up. The way to true healing is to be with them and extract them, so that when they show up, they are different facets, different stories, and not the exact same thing over and over and over again. So, pleasure. Where are you denying it? What are your old go-to ways of not allowing it? And like I said, I think seeing it in diet culture and a lot of the work I do with my clients, when we delve into nutrition and herbs to support their physical body while we're reorienting and shifting the subtle, the gross, dense body, gross as in dense, not yucky, has to catch up. So we support the physical while doing the behind the scenes work. And we'll get into nutrition stuff, and it's just amazing how much shame and denial of pleasure is linked into that too. And food, sex, and sleep, right? Those are those things that make a human being, that are required for our continued existence, really. So just looking at these basic human things and the denial and suppression and shame and perversion that is in those basic human things. So just sit with that. Where are you denying yourself pleasure, and how is it showing up in your life, in your physical existence? We tend to have a very warped view of sex in our culture, as I've already talked about. The shame and the guilt also around creative expression. How many of us have created something and immediately hid it or destroyed it and diminished its value? I know I've done that. And I'm willing to imagine that you have as well. How many of us experience the same reactions around pleasure or sexuality? It's like, ooh, yes. Oh, no. Ooh, yes. No. It's like, I want it, I don't. Resistance and, what am I trying to say? Acceptance, resistance. Repulsion, attraction. So honestly assess your relationship with pleasure, creativity, receiving, and sexuality. Tapping into your authentic, flowy nature allows true healing to take place for so many reasons. One, you're allowing the body's energetic and physiological circuitry to realign and rebalance. So those the current paradigm and status quo that you have for yourself right now is constantly playing out, and therefore constantly creating and recreating the same physical experience that you are experiencing with the same challenges and the same symptoms. So when you tap into your authenticity and like what is truly pleasurable, where am I in my creative flow, starting first with getting really embodied and assessing it, and then allowing yourself to receive it, you're starting to shift those subtle realms, starting to shift that energetic and physiological circuitry of your entire being so that it can realign and start to create in the way that you really want and that you really deserve, and that's super yummy. It takes all of it. So all levels, our physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, need tending. Yes. The receiving requires the end of resistance, and it requires surrender, which is often the biggest struggle, right? To end the resistance to receiving and to end the resistance to surrender, and just like resistance itself, we're just like, it's a big struggle, and that's what's necessary. And once we can kind of be with that and face those little gremlins, that's when the beauty and the magic really start to take fold. So identifying what our natural urges and desires are. Where are you not allowing yourself to receive them, to act upon them? And what are you longing to create? How do you long to be touched? What do you desire to taste, to see, to smell? What is pleasurable? From a sensorial perspective, what are you longing to receive? And from that, when you are clear on that vision and you've received it, what are you longing to create? It's this give and take, beautiful inhale, exhale, in, out process, and dance with life and with ourselves. And what are you consuming instead when you are denying this natural, authentic dance? So when you're resisting and you're denying this pleasure and this receptivity, what's happening in its place? And how is that serving or really not serving you? How is that wreaking havoc? How is that perpetuating the current status quo and maybe even making it worse? In my example that I gave when I was putting this together, and it was like the day before my skin was looking good, and then it was like, oh crap, I knew where I was denying myself pleasure. I needed more pause. My physical body was requesting more time for integrating and digesting. Because my brain, she's a quick little cookie. I mean, I'm just constantly, like, I'm a highly sensitive person. I am taking in all the time, evaluating, reevaluating, assessing, thinking. You know, I've got little notebook pages everywhere of just ideas, so she's always going. And my physical body is quite sensitive, and she requests, like, hey, I need you to take a pause for a moment and allow me to digest the experiences of life for just a little bit, and then you can get back to what you're doing. And I denied that. That's pleasurable to me. That's me receiving pleasure by dropping into this state. And I denied that. And the result was the already sensitive body that I am wearing, who has spoken to me clearly in the past, who I know has struggles still and is healing from endocrine challenges, hormonal imbalances because of early life trauma, who doesn't like to be pushed very much. I pushed her. And so that's the manifestation. And that is exactly where I'm inviting you to kind of check in and assess when you deny yourself this pleasure and receiving. How does that show up? Hi, Crystal. Thank you for being here. So, right. And then assessing where that comes from. I think I touched on that in my example. So that's where we really like spiral deep, deep, deep. It's like, okay, this is what I'm noticing, and then why is that there? And then keep going, and it's this beautiful spiral dance. So I talked about mine being from like early childhood stuff, and most likely ancestral, like I talked about earlier. And if you're just checking in, like rewind, there's so much good stuff on here. I mean, I'm going to toot my own horn right now. So identifying where the shame and the guilt and the resistance originally comes from, yeah? And as we discussed in yesterday's session with embodiment, all the answers are in your body. All of them. In your body and in your physical existence. So everything physical is like the same. I use it interchangeably, just like symptom and challenge. It's all the same manifestation. The difference with true healing is that you're using these symptoms and challenges. You're using them, not pacifying them, using them as the key to keep going deeper and deeper and to get to the real answer versus just pacifying and putting them away. Because they'll get louder. The things that we resist get louder and louder and louder, right? Thank you, universe. The symptoms are messengers and not the actual problem, ever. Symptoms and challenges are messengers and never the actual problem. So back to sexuality and creativity. Surrendering to your true desires and allowing yourself to transmute these lower energies, these old beliefs, these old mindsets, these old habits and patterns and undigested trauma and grief results in receiving pleasure in the form of creative expression and flow, actualizing your purpose, and true healing. So our true flow, our true purpose and pleasure are in the pain. I wish it weren't so. It is. They're in the challenge. That's where they live. So suppressing and bypassing our needs and desires requires a lot more energy than surrendering and receiving them. And that, again, right, and there's like all these things sound like such paradoxes, and they're so juxtaposed to everything we've been taught. suppressing and bypassing your needs and desires takes a lot more energy than surrendering to them and receiving them. And we can see how that plays out in our lives. And just keep going with my example with the chin and the stress and the way I was pushing myself for this. That was suppressing and bypassing my need. That required more energy than simply receiving the pleasure and letting myself be with it. So we can really see how these subtle imprints, namely shame and its many friends, guilt and embarrassment, all these things, are just insidious little bastards and running the show. If we don't know what's pleasurable to us, how will we ever have a truly present, nourishing, abundant, and purposeful life? I can't think of anything. I think it's impossible personally. We must allow ourselves to receive pleasure and to access higher states of consciousness, wherein we merge the physical body and the human parts with our higher selves and the cosmos at large. This merging creates a third energy that is accessed in times of flow and creativity and in sexual pleasure. There's a link between the sacral chakra and the third eye chakra. Both are receptive. We receive pleasure and allow ourselves to know what is pleasurable, to know our needs, to know through our senses and our second chakra. And at the third eye space, we have received that more psychic knowing, the visions for our lives, visions for the world, clear and intuitive knowing. So down below in sacral is our literal and metaphorical waters, like I said it before, our reproductive organs. Up here, this is our pineal gland and more space, right? So we've got dense and space coming together to make some magic love. And that third energy is created and creates our experience on earth, as well as the true healing that we get to experience in our physical existence by merging these pieces. So just think about all that wasted vital life force that we are just throwing away by continuing to engage in the resistance and the bypassing versus engaging and just taking the mask off of the challenge and really being with it. Think about all that wasted vital life force. All of that energy is taken from the functions of our physical body. This is how disease happens. And just think about how all that energy could be put to so much better use. If the body wasn't playing catch up to these outdated, subtle pieces of us that are experiencing the challenge, that are creating the three-dimensional challenge, how much more just nourished we would be. I mean, seriously. So, again, if you missed yesterday's with embodiment, that is always the first piece. Always. That is our foundation. That is how we truly assess what is. And then everything else I'll share with you, the rest of the 6 pieces, are really in no particular order. And it always requires that foundation. And so this creativity and the sexuality piece, this sacred sexuality and tapping into this primal life force, this Shakti, if you will. There's also a Native American term, it escapes me, but it translates to the thing that moves through all things. So the thing that animates all things. It is this incredibly erotic, meaning to be alive, energy that is flowing through all. So to find this true healing, it's really merging the human and the high self and letting them come together to birth this third energy. When the wires are crossed and when we're holding on to the outdated bullshit, that's where the challenges and the symptoms come from. So before we close, I offered an exercise yesterday, and I'll always offer for the rest of this series a little practice for you to do to play with the concept that we've just learned. And again, my intention was for you to benefit for yourselves, obviously, to take take what resonates and incorporate it into some practices that you are already using, some beliefs and philosophies that you use in your practices. If you're a fellow light worker, perhaps adding them to your medicine bag with your clients. And yeah, so I work a lot with so many different modalities. So many. My clients are so lucky. But mudras have served me very well in my path. And if you're like, what the hell is a mudra? So a mudra it's like yoga for the hands. So just very simple little, well, some of them aren't so simple, but ways of holding the hands in such a way that creates physiological and energetic shifts in our physical and energetic bodies. So I wanted to offer today Yoni Mudra. And yoni is the Sanskrit term for our vaginas, and kind of the cosmic yoni, the yoni of the great mother. So Mother Earth, this kind of, which ties very into this primal creative life force and creativity and sexual essence that flows through and animates all living things. And I'm looking outside at this fantastic, huge pine tree who's just like emanating this Shakti. So, Yoni Mudra. You're going to take your hands. I get to do more. I feel like I've just been puppetry all day long. I'm very animated. So, we take our hands. You're going to interlace the middle ring and pinkies. Interlace them so that the tips are touching. I'm bringing the tip of the index finger and thumb together. All right. So I was apart. I'm like this. I am folded in, letting the tips touch. Index, thumb touching. Okay. I'm bringing it, so you're just bringing it straight down so it stays like this. Bringing it in front of your womb space. You can let your hands rest on your womb space. It would be the backs of your hands. I realize you cannot see my womb space, but there we go. Okay, so you are resting like so. And just come to a comfortable seat. And if your feet are on the floor, let them be flat and grounded. Relax your shoulders. And if it's comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes for a few moments. And soften your shoulders, soften your belly. Feel your feet. Feel your legs. Feel your bottom resting, supported in the chair that you're in. Just turn your awareness to your low belly and womb space. This place of creativity, of vital life force, of creation, of birth, of rebirth, of birthing ideas, of birthing humans. And so this place of ideas and pleasure, receiving, and become aware of your hands, feeling the tips of your fingers, all of them pressed into each other. And as your hands are open, so the space between your thumb and index fingers, as they're open, feel for energetically dropping into receptivity. And just notice if there's resistance to that. So when you hear receive, receptive, noticing how that lands in your body. And feel for softening into that resistance, not bypassing it, allowing it to be. Feeling safe and supported so that you may receive more and more, so that you may know what is truly pleasurable to you, what you truly desire, what's truly pleasurable to your body, to your senses. And softening in to give yourself permission to receive. Giving yourself permission to receive that which you want, to allow yourself to know what you want, to receive the abundance, the bounty, the pleasure. And as resistance creeps in, you just keep loving it and feel the support and the energetic opening and opening through your hands into this very sacred sacral chakra and all that it literally and metaphorically stands for in your physical body, your emotional body, your mental body, and your energetic body. And take a big deep breath. And gently coming back. Hello, welcome back. So I invite you to play with Yoni Mudra and to please share your experiences with it. I feel better. Share your experiences with it over the next couple of days. And please, if you didn't watch yesterday's video, have a look. And feel free to post any questions or insights. I am so compassionately and passionately and lovingly here for each one of you during this series. So today was part 2. There are 7 pieces. I'll be back tomorrow for the 3rd piece of true healing, and maybe my skin will have decided to be better as I drop into deeper embodiment and more receptivity to pleasure and working with what is super pleasurable to me. So please share how these are serving you. And again, share any questions, reach out. I'm just so excited. I love all of this and I love all of you. And thank you for joining in. I really appreciate you beauties. Have a wonderful rest of your Saturday and I'll see you tomorrow.